Hi, this is Jody Roundhouse. Welcome to the Roundhouse Report. Today is April 25th, Thursday. I'm reporting on this. This is hilarious. Now, I'm trying to keep my videos shorter now. So, with that in mind, I just got this in the mail. This has to do with my article. Or not my article, but my analysis of it. This thing's a killer. Look at that. Huh? Another thing I got in the mail here. Look at that guy. Huh? Huh? Careful as shit. I don't know what you people know about weapons, but you better be careful, even if they're a blade. It's not just guns. Weapons are dangerous. Please subscribe. Can't really see that, can you? Please subscribe to the Roundhouse Report on YouTube. I'm also on Minds.com. www.minds.com/Jody Roundhouse. One word. This video is about the insanity that is taking place in Eastern Europe. Very similar to what's happening, well, in the rest of Europe, but most similar to what's happened in the United States vis-a-vis Trump. Like, it's weird. During the presidential election leading up to 2016, one soundbite against Trump was, the only qualifications he has is being a freaking, like, an actor on that Fire You show, whatever it was called, the reality TV show. He's just a reality TV show star. Blah blah blah. This guy, who was elected he's brand new, president of Ukraine, and I have a hard time with these names. Volodymyr Zelenskiy, okay? This is a picture of him. He is and I think he still is doing this show. He has a show, it's called, the show's called Servant of the People, and it debuted years and years ago, way before he had any designs on becoming president of Ukraine, because the show began before 2014, when Russia, under President Putin, annexed Crimea, part of Ukraine, and since has fomented a civil war, essentially, in eastern Ukraine. He was talking about this stuff. By the way, this show, he owns the production company that makes the show. So I'm pretty sure that his character, he plays a high school teacher in the show. I'm pretty sure that his character and the views espoused in the show are probably on point with who he really is in real life, given that he probably has final say on everything regarding the show. And regarding the show, Servant of the People, it premiered in 2015. My apologies, I was wrong. In an interview, I'm reading from the article, which, by the way, is from the Associated Press, written by Natalia Vasilyeva, Russian. In an interview earlier this year, Zelensky, the new president of Ukraine, told foreign journalists that he wanted to put a, quote, dream country in place. He wanted to put a dream country in place. Okay, screw all that. That's great. But the point of this video, President Putin of Russia wanted a puppet government in Ukraine, in Kiev, the capital of Ukraine. In 2013, because Putin's goal is to break up NATO, which is pushed into Russian sphere of influence, which I disagree with. If you look at it, I'm an American. If I stand back from being an American and just look at it objectively, from like a geostrategic, analysis kind of a thing, if I was Putin, I would have done the same freaking thing. It was 2013, and for years and years, well before this election in Crimea, or rather in Ukraine in 2014 that went south, he has been trying, mainly through disinformation campaigns, I'm sure you've heard a lot about that on social media, he has been trying systematically to undermine and break apart NATO and the European Union. Now, Ukraine in 2013/2014, they voted in a pro-West leader. Pro-West meaning, we want to join the EU. We want to join NATO. Russia, Putin, it's Putin. It's all about the charismatic leader, and that's the age of world balance of power politics that we've come down to, is the charismatic leaders. And what kind of weird, bizarre stuff are they going to end up doing? Think of like Hitler, think of Otto von Bismarck, President Kennedy, Lincoln. These are individual charismatic guys. You got Trump on the world stage right now, making very aggressive military moves on the foreign policy stage. You have Xi Jinping in China doing the same thing. Again, these guys are nationalistic, they're militaristic, they're populist. Italy, same thing. France, Germany, they're all cracking down. Hungary and the smaller Balkan regions, the Balkan states, leading into Greece, they've all cracked down. They've put up freaking fences and they put their military on the border. And they had clashes a couple of weeks ago where the migrants were trying to surge forward and they beat them back. They're taking it seriously. In Western Europe, France namely, Germany, Central Europe, and then France and England, they're starting to take this stuff seriously too. So Putin's been trying to break these alliance structures, the West, that has been fighting, the Russians since after World War II. And you got to keep in mind, the Cold War, when that ended with American winning, when that ended in 1990/1991, Putin is a KGB guy. He was a top KGB official from the 1970s onward. He was all about the Soviet Empire, and I don't blame him. Yeah, I like empires. I don't like how they killed everybody, but I like the idea of empires. It's like old school, because the nation-state system's only been around for a few hundred years. It's not going to remain like this. It's going to change. The age of the empire may come back. That's what it's looking like. So he's trying to push NATO away from him, and I don't blame him. The wars in Georgia, Georgia is a tiny little nation state south of Russia. Georgia in 2008 was trying to do the same exact thing in Ukraine with their newly elected, in 2014, their newly elected pro-Western leader. Georgia had a similar thing. They wanted to join NATO. The United States actually sent troops to Georgia to help train them. We were prepping them to join NATO right south of Russia's border, literally. Russia was like, F this. This was back in 2008, and they initiated a war against Georgia, and they created instability within that country to where now we can't have them in NATO. Because having them in NATO is a massive liability now for us. And honestly, from Putin's point of view, excuse me, I would have jacked that whole territory. I would have taken Georgia back. Because historically, that is part of Russia. And by historically, I mean, Cold War era-esque, the USSR. Putin is a KGB guy all the way. He's Soviet Union. He said, quote, and this is a paraphrase of his quote, the collapse of the Soviet Union at the end of the 20th century, 1991, was the greatest geostrategic disaster of the 20th century. Okay, the 20th century had World War I, World War II, and the Cold War. The risk of nuclear annihilation was left and right. Yet, Putin believes that the fall of the Russian Empire, the USSR, the Soviet Empire, in 1991, was the greatest geostrategic failure, the greatest geostrategic failure, or, failings, or whatever, however you want to call it, of the 20th century. So we know where Putin's head's at. And again, Putin's an unknown character. We really don't know what he's about. Putin wants to break up NATO and the EU, like I said. He wants the Soviet Empire to come back, like I said. And there are striking parallels. Now, this is what's kind of scary. Striking parallels between Putin's actions and Hitler's actions. Now, I'm not doing this as a buzzword thing. I'm being legit. Trying to be. Because, keep in mind, Hitler came to power in 1933. Absolute power. From 1933 until 1939, in 1939 he initiated a war against Poland, in cahoots with Russia at the time. But from 1933 until 1939, 5 years, okay, he grabbed up several pieces of the Rhineland, Hitler did, without firing a shot, using, I guess back in the 30s would be considered gray zone warfare. without firing a shot. He, the Rhineland, the Deutschland, all the, Czechoslovakia, all this stuff, the Czech Republic, all these areas around Germany that were taken from Germany after World War One. He took them back without firing a shot. Hitler's excuse, literally the exact same excuse as Putin. These countries, the Deutschland, for instance, that Hitler took back without firing a shot, using diplomacy. These countries, historically, pre-World War One, have been a part of Germany. They have Germans that live inside their borders, but because you guys hacked everything up, they're a minority within those new countries that you made after World War One. So, they're being mistreated by these new governments in the Rhineland, in Czechoslovakia, in the Czech Republic, etc. They're being mistreated. No, they weren't. So he rolls in there with his tanks, but he doesn't have to fire a shot because everyone's like, what WTF is going on? And that's exactly what happened in 2014 when Putin's little green men rolled into Ukraine and without firing a shot took Crimea. For reasons that are strategic, I would have done the same thing if I was Putin. Crimea is their only way to get from Russia through the little I believe it's the Black Sea, through the straits, or the previous. I like to just call it Constantinople. I think that the Turks ruined the name. I think it's Istanbul now, but Constantinople, go through those straits and get out in the Mediterranean. The only way they can do that is with that freaking port in Crimea, literally on their border. So I don't blame them for taking that. And in fact, if I was Putin, I would have taken at least half of Ukraine, because if you think about it, it was the perfect opportunity. This was 2014. Obama was still in office. Now, he took Crimea. No one did anything except impose sanctions. Those sanctions are hurting Putin, and they're hurting his people, his oligarchs, his friends who are billionaires, and they're hurting Russia's economy. They're working. They're hurting him. Had he just gone a little bit further, though, and officially seized like half of Ukraine, the same thing would have probably happened. The sanctions may have been a little bit harsher, but no one would have done anything because at this point, NATO hadn't reawoken. It was only after 2014, from then until now, 2019, again, 5 years, that NATO has reawoken, and now we're starting to rotate troops in and out of Poland and the Baltic countries, Lithuania, Estonia, all that. Prior to that, we did not have a rotational force, but now we've reawakened after Putin started launching this aggressive stuff. Because now he's claiming in the Baltics, Lithuania, etc., and in the Balkans, he's claiming, these are minority ethnic Russians who are being mistreated, and under that guise, we're going to intervene to protect them. Hitler, from 1933 to 1939, looked like a relatively innocuous figure on the world stage. He didn't fire a shot. He used diplomacy, and there was some credence to it. There were ethnic Germans. Those countries, the Rhineland, the Deutschland, that was Germany. The freaking German Empire, pre-World War I. All that stuff was taken away from Germany. And by the 1930s, the Allied powers of World War I, namely France and England, they were starting to feel bad about the Treaty of Versailles that was signed after World War I that was so mean to Germany. So harsh, just absurd. They were starting to feel bad about that, so you had like a guilt factor. And then you had, Hitler doing, his diplomatic maneuvering. So he got all these territories. He kind of consolidated all the countries literally surrounding, Germany, from 1933 until 1939 without firing a shot. That was before anybody knew that World War II was going to happen. That was a 5-year span. 2014, when Putin went into Crimea and went to Ukraine and seized Crimea, because again, Ukraine had just elected in a pro-Western government that wanted to join the EU and wanted to join NATO. Putin's like, nope. He went in, he took Crimea without firing a shot. Okay, now it's 2019. It's been 5 years. Hitler, 1933 to 1939. 2014, 2019. It's been 5 years. It's been 5 years. Any day something could pop. Any day something could pop, and Putin utilizes gray zone warfare. Speaking of which, he seized Crimea, but in order to ensure that Ukraine would not become a member of EU, would not become a member of NATO, because they were so unstable. To ensure that, Putin instigated and continues to fight a war in eastern Ukraine, right on the border between Ukraine and Russia, that the media does not talk about. And if they do, it's in passing. This is like World War II over there. I have read source material from journalists who were embedded with these guys in eastern Ukraine. You have the Middle East, which is sand country. They have like buildings and stuff, but it's the Middle East. Whereas in Europe, you have a long-standing, architecturally, culturally, in terms of Western civilization and the ideals that we uphold. It's like World War II over there. These journalists were huddling inside of makeshift bomb shelters, being shelled in these cities that were turned into rubble, and they're fighting like street to street and stuff. No one talks about this, but that's what's happening right now in eastern Ukraine. It's essentially a civil war. This new president that was voted in, Zelensky, it's really weird if you follow the story. Google him and kind of follow his story. He was an actor. His show was all about what he wanted to do, what he wants to do, or what he envisions Ukraine to be. And then now he's the president of Ukraine. It's very similar to Putin. Or I'm sorry, it's very similar to Trump. He's a nationalist, he's a populist. He brings fresh eyes and ears and all that. He's trying to break up the swamp, I guess, in Ukraine, just as Trump says here about Washington, D.C. Excuse me. It's really it's quite funny. Zelensky, he once, quote, "a dream country," end quote. On the show, on his show, Servant of the People, which Netflix has picked up, this is a quote from Zelensky's character on that show. "We need to send a message that we are all Ukrainians, that you're one of us." And then I'm reading from the article. In the latest season of Servant of the People, Zelensky's character, Vasyl Holoboronko, assumes the presidency of a country. It's abstract, they don't want to be too on fire with it. Of a country that's split into 28 independent states, some of which resemble actual separatist fiefdoms in eastern Ukraine. So he was calling this crap right out the gate. 4 years later, now he's president. Now I don't know if Putin put him there, because he very well could have. This could be Putin's puppet, or time will tell. Or if this guy's legit, I'm doing my own thing, because this guy has undertones, if not overtones, of being pro-Russia and of understanding the realism of what's going on. He's a freaking Ukrainian. He understands the Russian sphere of influence. He grew up under the Cold War. He understands this crap, and he's saying, look, things are changing. These migrants coming in, things are changing. Russia launching out, doing, blitzing into freaking Ukraine, his country, things are changing. And he sees that. So he's floating the idea of essentially ceding, I guess, this is my interpretation, ceding eastern Ukraine to Russia, letting them have it, consolidating the rest of Ukraine. I don't have a map in front of me, but taking the sliver of eastern Ukraine, give that to Russia, and then the other, most of Ukraine, leading into Kiev and Eastern Europe and onward, would be its own thing. Ostensibly pro-West, but with realist tendencies, hence the 28 independent states. In the show, he says, quote, "Enough with the old slogans, North, West, South. We're one country. We're all Ukrainians." So he's kind of overlapping, even if you are Russian, you're still Ukrainian. And this goes back to the Cold War. For over 50, 60 years, these guys they saw themselves as a common thing. The Ukrainians may have hated the Soviets. There were uprisings against the Soviets that were brutally crushed. But nonetheless, this man was born into he looks like he's in his 40s. He was born into a system, the Cold War, in which things were very conservative, airtight, kept on lock, propaganda left and right. You had to be careful. He has an idea of of just growing up under that system. He has an idea of what's going on. Now, in the last season of the show, because his character rejects the idea of bribing or intimidating the separatists into reuniting. And what's so funny, this is a fictional show that he has made right when all this happened, and that means that it was being planned before it happened. Because this is a legit show. You don't just turn on the camera like I did now. You have to plan it out, you have to script it, etc. So he was planning this before Russia even invaded Ukraine. He knows what's up. In the first season of The Servant of the People, I think it's 2015, the president character, which is now the president of Ukraine, pushes out existing officials with reputations for corruption and abusing power. His character says, quote, "You and your allies have been at the helm for nearly a quarter of the century. And what changes do you see? Zero. Zero changes. Zero reforms." End quote. But his character on the show is despondent because he can't find a single honest professional to actually appoint to his cabinet. Because, things are pretty corrupt in Ukraine, thanks to Russia. Now, this is where it gets really funny. He became president, a few months ago. He very recently became president. During an actual presidential debate, Friday. This article is dated April 23rd. Today is the 25th. Yeah, today's the 25th. This is the 23rd. Tuesday. So this past Friday, he attended an actual presidential debate. So he literally was just elected in over the weekend, I guess. He attended a presidential debate on Friday. I'm reading from the article. Zelensky was surrounded by literally the same people, the actors who played his fake cabinet ministers on his TV show. He's standing there. He hasn't announced who he wants to appoint. All these actors are like standing behind him. So everyone's like, what the F is going on here? What is this? This is literally like a movie. And that's what people are saying. Fiction becomes reality in Ukraine. Fiction becomes reality in Ukraine. You couldn't write this. This is better than everything. All right, perks and privilege. Zelensky said it as early election returns came in, this Friday night, over the weekend, Monday, that he would cut the presidential administration budget, he would get rid of the perks that come with public office, the corruption, and move the seat of government out of central Kiev quote, "there is no traffic," end quote. Well, actually, he continues, quote, "I would like to find a place in Kiev or outside Kiev so that there would be no motorcades. And I would like to get rid of motorcades altogether." So you see what I mean? He's kind of like doing his own thing. The scripted, quote, this is when the scripted president of his show, the servant of the people, which, by the way, the article says, further blurring the line between fiction and reality, he named his political party, in real life, the same name as his show, Servant of the People. Okay? So we have some overlap there, and it's funny. The scripted president, of the Servant of the People, gives up his motorcade in season 1, in 2015. He gave up his motorcade, and this is well before Trump was elected. So he's kind of predates Trump. Excuse me. Not so much in ideology, but in actually being in power and being able, having these ideas and putting them forth. It's kind of, he overlaps with Trump, I guess. He overlaps. This is a movement going throughout Europe, throughout America. I mean, this is all going, Italy. They've elected a guy in there. He's saying no more migrants, and he's backing it up. You have these parties. You have the Scandinavian countries. These far right, not even far right. It's so absurd in Europe with regard to the millions of migrants that they've let in that you just need to be like slightly left of center or slightly right of center, and you're considered far right because you just want to get rid of like millions of migrants who are attacking your citizens and gang raping your women and soaking up all of your financial resources because you have to pay for literally millions of people to eat and have jobs. So this is in the show, Servant of the People, his character in season 1, 2015, he takes the bus or taxi to work, which you'd be assassinated in real life. He pushes through a bill in the show to relocate the executive branch offices of Ukraine to a Soviet-era pavilion on Kiev's outskirts. I'm going to repeat that. The new president of Ukraine, charismatic, populist, nationalistic leader, a realist who understands the situation, who, from what I can tell, is willing to cede a sliver of eastern Ukraine to Russia, just so he could consolidate and make his dream country, quote, a dream country, as he puts it. He pushes through a bill now that he's president. Oh, no, I'm sorry. In season 1 in 2015, he did this on the show. But now now that he's president, he's actually going to do it. It's weird. He pushes through a bill in the show to relocate the executive branch offices of the Ukrainian government to a Soviet-era pavilion on Kiev's outskirts. His reasoning, quote, "We will free the center of Kiev from those traffic jams," end quote. Like I said, Putin's stated goal is to break everything up. This guy could be Putin's puppet, time will tell. From what it looks like as of right now, this is all fluid. He seems to be his own man. He understands he's a realist. Trump has been supplying lethal aid, not defensive aid like Obama, and he would send like one bullet at a time. Trump is giving them anti-tank missiles, which the tanks are hurting them. Because you got to keep in mind, what Putin calls volunteers, again, gray zone warfare, little green men. These guys are decked out. They're military. They have tanks. They have armed personnel carriers. They have state-of-the-art howitzer, cannons, artillery, mortars. It's a battle. It's a war zone with tanks. A legit, like conventional World War II-esque style war zone in eastern Ukraine, where these guys are being shelled. Those journalists I told you about embedded with the rebels, the rebels are simply Ukrainians who are like, WTF, get out of here. But they're being shelled, and they're like, oh, this is like World War II, back when they were fighting. These little towns in eastern Ukraine have been rebuilt. But during World War II, they were destroyed, and now they're being destroyed again. So Putin wants everything broken up, and I don't blame him. So now what? Where do we stand now? NATO's been reawoken, and now we're starting to move troops in and out of the Baltic states, which Putin has his eyes on. Again, just like Hitler. There's a minority of ethnic Russians who speak Russian, and they're being mistreated by the government. They're not. But that's his excuse, gray zone warfare, for sending in, quote, volunteers who are so upset that they want to take matters into their own hands. That's what he's doing in eastern Ukraine. Except these, quote, volunteers are decked out in full special operations gear. They're kitted out with the best military equipment money can buy. They have state-of-the-art tanks, state-of-the-art artillery. So it's pretty clear. But they don't have a Russian flag on their shoulder. Little green men. Google that. Gray zone warfare. Very similar to Hitler's slow but determined actions seizing adjacent territories to consolidate his position before breaking out and conquering Europe in World War II. Very similar. We don't know what Putin's going to do. He could be the next Hitler. We don't know. We don't know. He's acting like it, as I just explained. Xi Jinping of China, he could be the next Hitler. He seized the South China Sea. He militarized it. Fait accompli, without firing a shot. Again, under Obama. Thank you, President Obama. You ruined our shit on the foreign policy stage. You ruined it. And this isn't even about based on ideology. You objectively ruined it. Now you have Russia. You allowed them, Obama, to do what they did. Now you have Xi Jinping, who has been voted in for the first time since Mao Zedong in 1949, when the communists officially took over China. Xi Jinping has been voted in as dictator for life of China. And he's highly militaristic. He has seized the South China Sea. That project of building those fake islands, the Spratly Islands and all that throughout the South China Sea, hundreds and hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of miles off of China's coast. That began under President Obama. The prep was probably underway for Bush, but then Obama took the torch because he became president, and he let those islands be built up. Fait accompli. Now the Chinese have power projection capabilities that they did not have 10 years ago. Now they have the South China Sea, through which 1/3 of the world's trade travels each year. It's pretty strategically vital economically and militarily because the Chinese are trying to push American influence outside of Asia. That's a whole different video. I'm getting way off track. So, the long game, Hitler acquired these territories without firing a shot in a span of 5 years. Putin did the exact same thing within a span of 5 years. That 5-year mark is hit. It's 2019 now. What's going to happen? What's going to happen? If I was Putin, I would have taken half of Ukraine and been done with it. That's what I would have done. It is their sphere of influence. Look at it from my point of view as an American. If an anti-Western or if an anti-American government was voted into Mexico, like a virulently anti-American government was voted in to lead Mexico, and then he made like close ties with Russia and like let Russian troops be based there. What do you look at Venezuela right now. Venezuela and the Russian troops that are there right now, and the Russian strategic heavy bombers that are there right now, and the Chinese troops that are there right now inside Venezuela, and Hezbollah from Iran that are inside of Venezuela, and Iranian officials that make up parts of the Venezuelan government under the fraudulently re-elected Maduro. Juan Guaido is the one who's recognized by everyone